back to the Eyes Up Life podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We are in the third to last episode of this series with Maxxis sponsored athletes, and I'm glad you're joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. Please make sure you check out all of the other episodes. And a little bit of background here before we jump into the episode. Eyes Up started as a 7,000-mile bike ride around the United States to raise awareness for distracted driving. I completed this ride solo and finished in September of last year. Immediately after completing the ride, I set out on a road trip to interview 21 athletes and affiliates of Maxxis Tires. Check out maxxistires.com, learn about their awesome products for anything with wheels. I like their tires for bikes. I also completed the road trip on a set of Maxxis tires on my friend's truck. They were kind enough to provide those tires for a safe means of transportation for the 7,000-mile road trip. Maxxis was kind enough to partner with me for this trip and connect me to these awesome people that you're listening to today. And my mission now is less focused on biking around the country and more on spreading this message of why it's so important to end distracted driving and the benefits of living with your eyes up, which extend far beyond just driving safely in the car. The benefits of digital wellness and living in real time off your phone, or at least with a smaller focus on time with your phone, are huge. And that's part of what we talk about in these conversations with the Maxxis athletes. Today, we have Courtney joining the program. Kate is an Olympian, a really talented mountain bike racer. She was number one in the world for a while and has a really strong career ahead of her. I spoke with Kate in the Bay Area of California, and we had an awesome conversation. I think she's really well-spoken and super aware of her own habits on social media. She even has some strategies in place already for herself to keep her phone use intentional and to minimize the distractions and wasted time. So stay tuned and listen in to my conversation with Courtney. Her career is super awesome. She's a really energetic, great person, was kind enough to lend me an hour of her time, and we'll talk to you at the end. Enjoy.
My name's Courtney. I'm a professional mountain bike racer from Marin County, California.
Sweet. Can you walk me through how you got into mountain bike racing?
Yeah, so I grew up at the base of Mount Tamalpais, which is where mountain biking was originally invented in the 60s and 70s, and just started riding for fun at a young age with my dad, which I think was kind of my first exposure to just being outdoors, exploring, adventuring, and having kind of the power to get myself from point A to point B. And then in high school, my high school had a mountain bike race team through the NICA League, and I was a runner. I did a bunch of different sports and thought, hey, maybe this would be great cross training, and immediately was hooked. So for my freshman year in high school, I obviously became very enamored with the sport, and things escalated quickly, and I ended up starting to race professionally when I started college.
What was like the first race that you did and when you were like, this is it? Or maybe you didn't have a moment like that, but...
Yeah, so my first mountain bike race ever, it was in the spring of my freshman year in high school, and it was through that NICA High School League, so the NorCal League. And the events are amazing. They're really a super inclusive but also competitive environment, and it's very family focused and also team based. So, you know, being the only girl on the team, I was very important to be able to score points for everyone. So you kind of had this really great environment as a starting point, and then this opportunity to really compete in the races. And for me, from the moment I kind of lined up and the gun went off in that first freshman race, I just loved competing. And I think, you know, in running and skiing, I loved training. I loved practicing. I actually was like the odd kid who liked like the hard work side of things. I liked going uphill. I liked being in the gym. I liked kind of that like off-season work of the sports. But running, competing was not that fun to me. It was just kind of a 17-minute sufferfest in cross-country running. And mountain biking was completely different. It was technical, it was tactical, it had these same endurance elements. It was super dynamic, and of course there's the equipment involved as well. And I feel like it gave me a platform not only to compete against other people and push myself, but really to compete against myself and kind of within myself. And that was something I was hooked on from the start.
So have you always been a pretty competitive person, would you say?
I would say yes. I've definitely always been competitive. I think, interestingly enough, growing up, I would say I was always someone that was like celebrated for working hard, like and hustling, but I was never very good at the sports I did. So I played soccer, I did gymnastics, I horseback rode, I ski raced, and I was always kind of like middle of the pack, but like with a lot of heart, which is actually kind of worse because I just felt, maybe I don't have the innate talent to be an athlete. And then I think when I found cycling in particular, I started to connect this work ethic and the ability to just kind of like commit myself to do the small things, to suffer, and to stay really focused, to seeing progress. And once I saw that, it kind of became, really motivating for me. And I think this little like competitive spirit I had found its home in cycling.
And so you got into it. What's been your career? How did you build it, and where are you at now?
Yeah, so I've been racing technically on a pro contract since I was a freshman in college in 2013. For the first 4 years, I was a full-time student, so I was a little overwhelmed with the balance of those two things, but I was racing in the U23 category internationally in World Cups, and I think just worked my way up really steadily. I started out, I like to say I was like in the 4 years of under 23, I was 8th in the overall, 4th in the overall, 2nd in the overall, and won the overall my last year of college. So I kind of just like step by step consistently followed that trajectory. And by the time I graduated, it was clear if I wanted to that I could do it full time. And of course, I jumped at that opportunity. And then, my first few years out of college were really successful. I was the first woman to win the World Championship for the U.S. Since, I think, 2001. And then the next year followed it up with a bunch of World Cup wins and a World Cup overall win, and auto-qualified to the Olympics. So it kind of like escalated pretty quickly at that point. And since then, have been trying to kind of like stay near the top. I had a really tough Olympic season, and I've been working my way back up. So slowly, getting back to trying to be on that podium and hopefully win some more races in the coming years.
So what year was it that you went to the Olympics? When was that?
It was 2021. It was supposed to be 2020, and then we had kind of a little bit of a gap year.
So it was literally just last year. Mm-hmm. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was a tough one. I think it's interesting, like when I tell the story of that trajectory of my career, you can kind of hear that there's like a lot of momentum leading into that 2020 year, and then it like falls flat for a little bit. And I think, it hit athletes at different points in their career. Some young athletes were like, oh my God, I get a year to train and try to make it. Or, some of the older athletes, it made them kind of say, okay, I'm going to retire now. Like that was the plan. And so I think it just like affected people really differently. And for me, it kind of came at this point where I was like really at a peak moment in my career. I'd qualified. I was kind of like, I would say like in pole position going into the Olympic year. And that pressure was really tough. I think, especially in the US, we had no races. And I went from first to 77th in the UCI ranking, just without even competing. So it was definitely like a big change of mindset. And I think I kind of kept the throttle completely open through that year and through 2021. And by the time I actually got to the Olympics, it didn't go well for a variety of reasons. But I think that throttle had been open a bit too long. So it required a huge reset and definitely a reassessment. And then I've been in a rebuilding phase, which I think has been easier at some points than others. I think now I'm like really appreciative of what this build is teaching me, and also of the gift of being able to say, okay, I want to get back to the top, but it's going to take a few years. and to put together a really solid plan and a really smart plan to do that consistently, similarly to how I did it the first time.
So knowing how much work goes into getting back to that point, what keeps you going? Because it can't possibly be easy mentally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think one of the hardest things as an athlete is dealing with those kind of like plateau experiences, I would say, is where, it's really fun when you're getting better quickly. I think young athletes, if you just kind of like add training to a motivated young athlete, like you'll go like this and you kind of see, oh, I'm getting better every year or every week, even. So for me, I think it's really appreciating this kind of overall process and creating really clear checkpoints for me. So, currently like having really good testing, having really clear objectives, not just in terms of I want to win this race, but like what within my performance team are we working on and what shows me that I'm doing a good job and making progress. And then on the other side, just having fun on my bike. So I think the combination of those two things are really what it takes to have me at my best. This kind of like clear progression, checkpoints, analytics side, and then also this like I just love riding my bike piece. And it's hard sometimes to balance those two and to keep them both kind of firing on all cylinders. But when I'm able to do that, I think, I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to be motivated. I'm just kind of along for the ride.
So can you talk to me about what the specific discipline that you compete at is like, and how the other forms of cycling play into that training for that discipline?
Yeah, so I race cross-country mountain bikes. Typically, a cross-country mountain bike race is about 4 to 5 kilometer course, and we do 5 or 6 laps for the women's race. So the goal is to have it be around an hour and a half in time. And the way I like to describe it is it's a little bit like sprinting a marathon. So it's a highly anaerobic sport. It's super high peak power for short periods of time, but then with descents mixed in. So you can stay at that high power. So it's not, like a slow endurance sport. It's like a repetitive, intense bouts of effort. So that requires really kind of dynamic training. You have to have that base endurance, that big engine, which is more base training. I do a lot of that on my gravel bike or my road bike. You have to have the skills so that you can navigate those descents when you're maxed out, not make mistakes, be smooth, and do it consistently. So I train a lot on my trail bike for that, and of course my race bike. And yeah, all together, I think when you can kind of like master these different skills, you're able to put together a great performance.
Is there one type of ride that's your favorite? Like if you had a dream riding experience?
Dream ride. I mean, my heart will always be with my mountain bike. I think, that's what got me into the sport. I loved being able to like ride to the top of Mount Tam. I think for me, that ability to just like go from point A to point B and see how far you've come, and particularly get a good view at the top, has always been a huge part of the sport for me. Long climbs, fun descents, and on my mountain bike, I think would be the best.
So you do a lot of riding off trails, like on roads. Like you were saying that you rode today on the road. So talk to me about being in a really heavily populated area and what it's like with other users of the road and that experience being on a bike.
Yeah, it can often be a little bit of a tricky experience. I think around here, where I grew up in Marin and where I live now, it's a little bit easier to get out of the off the beaten path when you go on trail. So that's why I particularly love my gravel bike for base training, where I can kind of like take some shortcuts, go where the cars aren't. But there's always going to be some time on busier roads. And, that can be a really eye-opening and pretty kind of shaking experience to be on the road, having especially motorcycles coming really close to you and just not having any control over that. So I think there's a degree to which I'm able to limit my exposure. I ride on trail a lot, try to be safe, have a tail light, stay in the bike lane to the best of my ability. But there's also just going to be some scenarios in which you just have to kind of hope for the best. And
Have you had any direct or indirect experience with distracted drivers or close calls, and what were those like?
Yeah, there's definitely been quite a few close calls. I think distracted driving is a huge part of that when people just aren't paying attention and aren't able to either see if there's a cyclist or kind of like read what's happening. Obviously, they're a little bit more kind of tentative around cars, but around a bike, like if I hit a car, they're going to be okay. I might not be, but I think they're a little less attentive to cyclists. I've had a few like people kind of either turn in front of a group of cyclists. Luckily, I'm usually with people who know how to ride their bikes really well, so we can do a little bit of defensive bike riding and avoid the worst of it. But I've definitely also had a few times where, like the worst example, I was with my dad and we were turning left and we were on like a pretty fast road, but it was like very clear we were in the middle of the road with our like signaling we were turning, and a car came around the corner and was in the other lane, like on the other side, trying to pass. And it was just a super aggressive move. I don't know if it was a result of distracted driving or just being a really bad driver or an irresponsible driver. But I almost got wrecked on that, like turning in. And actually my dad just started screaming and I kind of like at the last minute like bailed from turning and the car like skidded and stopped. So that was my worst like almost hit by a car experience. I'm pretty sure it was like more traumatic for my dad than me and he will like never forget this moment. But I think it was a good example. In my opinion, I think it was probably just really irresponsible driving. But if that had been irresponsible driving plus distracted driving, there's no way they would have kind of like figured out what was happening and been able to avoid the worst of it. And so that was definitely an eye-opening experience that has made me a little bit more conservative in the future.
What keeps you motivated to continue riding on the road? Because I know a lot of people who have just totally scrapped road riding altogether and are only riding, mountain or gravel. What keeps you going?
It's great for training. Riding on the road is awesome for training. And I really enjoy it. And I think for me, I try to think about ways to keep myself safe, to like really be responsible, pay attention, anticipate what other people are doing. My dad talks about like defensive driving a lot, and he told me that all the time when he was teaching me to drive. And now we talk about defensive riding, where you see a car up ahead and you just assume the worst. Just assume that they're not paying attention at all, and put yourself in positions where you can kind of manage it. And I would say, there's of course a huge category of things that are going to be completely outside my control. So it's easy to say, oh, I'm a good bike rider. I can avoid certain things, which is true. But if someone's like texting and driving in the bike lane, there's not much that I'm going to be able to do about that situation. So there's certainly a little bit of kind of acceptance of risk, I would say. But there's also certainly a big focus on like mitigating the risk wherever possible.
What's your approach to driving and your relationship to distractions in the car?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. Like I for sure am like changing music and like fiddling with directions a lot when driving, and it's something that's made me a little bit more compassionate, I would say, to drivers. Like, of course, if you're texting and you're just like not paying attention, like clear, that is not okay. Like you are in a really dangerous situation. But I also understand the stress of like being late to something, not knowing where you're going, looking for where to park. And I think that's where like just, again, being really defensive as a driver and a cyclist, we can all kind of look out for each other better. Because for me, of course, like I think about it from the perspective of being a cyclist. Like when I see a cyclist and it's a sketchy pass, I just stop and wait and sit behind them, give them a bunch of room. And I think that's like comes from my own experiences riding, and maybe a lot of people don't have that experience. But in terms of like the distraction part, I think it is like there is a degree to which like anyone driving in the modern day, if you have music and an audiobook or you have like alerts on your phone or you have a map, like there is a lot of input coming in. And so I can appreciate how challenging it is to like resist that and really like focus. And that that's something that I definitely struggle with as well.
Yeah, and there's so many distractions beyond the phone. And a few days ago, someone brought up the point of kids in the car. Like if you're a teenager and you're driving around with your friends, like they're obviously going to be distracting, like using TikTok or whatever,
Yeah.
and just like that's a hard thing. All of them
Dropping a water bottle, like
Yeah,
I don't know.
right.
There's just
like what's
that's a really good point.
There's not an easy solution, but I'm curious to hear if you have thoughts on a step that we all can take to move us forward in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a really good way of talking about it, and I appreciate that, because I would say my like impulse is to be like, I never have my phone anywhere near me in the car, which is like unrelatable and not accurate. Like we all have to like navigate in this new system, which I think hopefully is evolving a little bit. I would say for me, having an integrated system where my phone like shows up on the navigation is like in a safe place and it's like linked to the car system, that's actually helped a ton, where you don't ever reach for your phone. You can like control the music on the steering wheel, or you can have the directions like be visible to you without having to kind of like look down in a way that like really takes your eyes off the road, or even having like the audio for the directions in, where you can just kind of like glance at the map and you like understand what's happening. I think all of those little changes have just made the right thing to do the easy thing to do. And when I think about habit formation and for my own self, like how to limit that distraction, having good systems is something that I think can really help me. Do not disturb is a good example. Having it linked into the car is a good example. And then also just like making the choice to table those thoughts that pop into your head when you're driving. You're like, oh, I should do this. I should talk to this person. I should send a message. I think that's the hard part that we all have to kind of grapple with.
For sure. Do you use the driving focus do not disturb feature while you're driving? Like, is that on while you're driving, or?
It comes on automatically. It actually comes on my bike rides too. It thinks I'm as fast as a car. No, I'm kidding. I'm like,
talk about unrelatable.
Here we are driving. No, I think that helps a lot. Honestly, like one of the biggest changes I've made that is like a really small, subtle thing is when I'm driving, if I have like a long drive and I think of something that I need to tell someone, I just call them. And I think that's like a very like weird thing at first, especially like, I don't know, in my generation, like in your generation, like calling is weird. Like if my best friend calls me, I'm like, hey, you okay? But I've started to do that, and usually people are like, it's nice to connect. It's like people are happy to hear from you, and you can get that kind of message across without needing to text. And so that's something I've tried to do. And there's like a little side benefit where you like end up catching up with people, whether it's like calling my brother. Like I don't talk to my brother that much right now. He lives in Denver. So like give him a call, tell him the little thing I wanted to text him, and just do that in audio. I think it makes driving more pleasant, and it keeps me less distracted, where I'm not like on the phone or texting. Like I can do that on speakerphone or through the audio of the car, and not take my eyes off the road.
And then you don't have to worry about texting them later because everything's all wrapped up.
Exactly. So I think that can also be distracting if you're like, oh, I have this like to-do list that I'm making. Yeah. Although I guess what I just described to you is talking on the phone while driving, which sounds very distracted, but can be focused.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And there's a lot of gray area, because literally everything that's not just putting your eyes on the road and driving you could argue that it's a distraction. And I think the point that you were making earlier about having systems to minimize and cut out the worst offenders is going to be the best way forward, versus asking people to, I mean, we'll get to this later, but it's we're not going to ask people to just abandon social media altogether, to like have healthier have better mental health, that's a ridiculous ask. Yeah. So like, yeah, having those systems in place is great. What would you say to someone who is a regular texter while driving, and they just don't understand that they can't multitask, and what they're doing is really stepping up the risk of causing a crash or death?
Yeah, I would say, you can tell people all you want, like do this, don't do this. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be honest with yourself. And I think admitting like when you are putting yourself in a dangerous situation, and most importantly, when you're putting other people, like the people around you, the people on bikes, the kids crossing the street, in danger, that is something that you need to kind of like be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm doing the best I can and I'm making good decisions. And I do think I've had some of those moments myself where like had to like do a quick thing and you think like I really wanted to do that, but like that was unsafe, or like I really need to like be honest with myself in these quiet moments where there's no one else and there was no accident and there's no feedback that was super dangerous. But I know that wasn't the right thing to do, or I know that wasn't like I wasn't focused in that moment, or I wasn't driving safely. I think that's really what it's going to take to make those changes, and acknowledging that we're all imperfect. And yeah, like I'm talking on the phone on speakerphone to my brother sometimes, as I just said. But if I can do that and be really focused on the road and give bike space and be driving well, then I can feel okay about that. And so having that conversation with yourself and finding the ways that you can limit those moments that kind of make you question whether you're, all there, all focused and doing the right thing.
Yeah. Something that's been hard for me is it's hard to draw a hard line, especially, so the texting while driving thing is fine. I think it's hard to argue. Well, it's not hard to argue with people, but it's hard to make a point with people who are like, I am good at driving in a straight line on a highway with no one on the road and using my phone, because yes, 99% of the time there's going to be no one in front of you and you'll be fine. But like, how do you make the point that there's a chance that something could happen and you'd kill someone, Yeah. And the same is true with like stopping at a red light. Like any state with the hands-free law, you're not supposed to be on your phone even at a red light. Like, how do you tell someone that you can't be on your phone at a red light? Because it seems pretty innocent to a rational person, because like unless you're just asleep on your phone, like you just put it down when you start driving again,
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that was illegal.
Yeah,
but in most states,
in
like if you're completely stopped, it's still illegal to be.
It's still texting, or still, you can't have your phone.
That's super. I like literally didn't know that.
Yeah.
But
like,
how do you make that argument? Yeah. And I can understand that. I think that's difficult, and like that is where those like gray area things come in, where it's like, if you like miss the light and you're there for like 10 minutes at like a 6-way thing and you like answer a message, like you probably aren't really putting someone at risk. But if you're creating habits that you keep edging up, oh, well, I did that and it was fine. Oh, well, now we're moving a little bit and I'm just finishing it. Okay. Like you can start to rationalize things that do become really dangerous and potentially life-threatening.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because, and that's why people text and drive, because they've had so many instances where they've done it and it's been fine and everything's okay. So it's just reinforcing incorrectly like the bad behavior.
Yeah. And I mean, hopefully, like, back to technology, like I really think that there are going to be other solutions that will help us continue to be like more hands-free. Like you can dictate text, you can dictate things. And thinking while driving is not necessarily distracted driving. I think that's been a pastime forever. But if you can avoid the times that, you are taking your eyes off the road and you are completely turning your attention to something else, like I think that would reduce risk a lot, especially for cyclists like me who are out there training.
Yeah, agreed. Let's pivot to social media. You have a very strong social media presence. I'm curious to hear about what your timeline has been with social media, what your day-to-day is like with it, and how that kind of plays into your normal life and the balance.
Yeah, I think social media is a tricky one. I haven't had like a normal, like just using it within my friends' relationship with social media ever, just because I have had this kind of cycling career and there's always been this kind of public facing aspect of my presence on social media. So for me, it's ended up being, in many ways, difficult to manage. How is it interfacing with my personal life? Like, what do I want to share? What do I not feel comfortable sharing? And then, of course, like in terms of feedback, like both positive feedback, do I need this? Is this helpful for my life? And negative feedback, like how do I navigate this? Is this negatively affecting me? Can be just challenging to sort out. But at the end of the day, I think I've come to the opinion that it can be a really positive tool when used correctly. So for me, I've thought a lot about what are the types of things I want to be sharing and why am I sharing them? And overall, what I came back to is I really believe in hard work over a long period of time, working towards a big goal. And I believe that cycling makes people's lives better. And I think that I can tell my story over time in a way that's like fun for me to share and to connect with other people who are pursuing the same thing or interested in the same thing or might want to give cycling a try. And also kind of just like show that process. So I end up posting like a lot of the same things. It's kind of boring. Like I'm in the gym 2 days a week. I'm on my bike every day. I'm posting these same types of things. But I think through that, I really hope to, inspire other people to work towards those long-term goals, to get outside, to ride their bikes with their friends, to start riding if they've never tried it before. And I think that can be really positive. There are, of course, the negative sides that have to be managed. But overall, I've kind of seen that, when I'm being intentional about it, those positives outweigh the negatives.
Do you find yourself kind of getting sucked into social media consumption on a personal basis? And how, if you don't, great. But if you do, how do you balance that? Do you set?
Yeah. I have a timer. I have a limit for sure. Primarily, I'll get to my limit like posting something, just like sharing things. But I've never been like a huge scroller. I'll like check it maybe once or twice a day, and just like 5 minutes or less, like see what's going on. And occasionally I do get down the rabbit hole of like dog videos. That's kind of my like, if I'm having a bad day and there's like cute Vizsla puppies doing something cute, like that definitely is great. But I try to limit primarily the amount that I'm consuming on social media. And I think actually one of the big things that I did last year that was really helpful is I just thought a lot about like the people I was following and what was showing up in my feed. And I think, I follow a lot of like amazing female athletes. I follow some hilarious dogs, and I follow some like great thinkers and researchers and leaders within the sports science world. And I actually am exposed to so much information and inspiration and motivation on a daily basis when I do check that it does keep me coming back for that.
So it sounds like you have a really quite healthy relationship with social media, which, I mean...
We'll see. Like, what is healthy?
Right. But, I mean, relative to the other side of things, which is, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, young people in particular just kind of getting exposed to a lot of garbage and getting trapped in it. Like, what's the...
Oh, totally. I mean, it can just, like, dominate your life. And I think it can also, like, really impact the way you think about yourself. So for me... like there's certainly been times where that relationship has been, I would say, less healthy. And in recent times, I think it's been really positive for me to like contemplate that why. Like, why am I sharing this? What am I like, what's the point? Like, is this a waste of my time? And when you have that overall like, no, this is why. These types of posts are to inspire young women to ride bikes. Like all of a sudden, it becomes less about you and a reflection of like you as a person and this kind of like ego identity of, do people like me and how are they commenting? And oh, this person, like one of 80 comments was mean and now I feel bad. So I think really like separating that piece of like, this is a piece of who I am or a piece that I'm choosing to share from who you are as a person in the real world and how you feel about yourself is a really important kind of like separation to make. And for me, defining that like why piece was really helpful. And the why could be simple. It does not have to be to like inspire cyclists. Like it could be show my friends cool stuff I'm doing. Like I use Strava a lot, and I actually I have a private account that's literally just for my friends. Like I have 10 friends, like there's not that many people that I need to like see everything I'm doing all the time. But like, I love it. It's like so fun to see where my friends are riding or what days they're out and like link up for rides, and with people that I actually know. And that's a very different relationship with social media than putting something out for 500,000 people to see. So I think that can be like a very broad definition of like what's comfortable for you and what you want. But if it is like, I'm putting this out there because like I feel bad about myself and like I need positive reinforcement, there are a lot of ways to get that in other places in your life that will be more positive and healthy and help you like grow to, it will help you outgrow that feeling rather than kind of like put a plug in the sinking ship of that feeling.
Any advice you would offer for people who haven't quite gotten to that point where they're, have the awareness of their use of social media and are kind of like stuck in sort of like the self feeding negative spiral?
Yeah. I mean, I do not have it all figured out. It's something that I like repeatedly check in on. Like I check in on it with myself. I talk to my husband about it. Like I check in on it with friends and family about like, are we at a good level? Like, are we in a good place? It's kind of like mental health in general, where you just got to check in with it and keep working towards it and be willing to face the challenging parts and make changes. I would say my best advice in terms of managing social media is like, start with something small. Start with a time limit. Like that actually made a huge difference for me, just because like I ended up setting it at 45 minutes a day, which sounds...
Wait, just to stop you,
Sorry.
You're talking about the like setting a limit on your phone for specific
Yeah, like
apps.
I have, like Instagram has a 45-minute limit for me, which usually like it is part of my job. So I do have like a giveaway post or something, and those take kind of a long time to put up. So that was like the healthy amount for me. That was like appropriate. I think my husband's is like 15 minutes, so he can like give me a little shade on that. But it was 45 minutes. And I found there were like multiple times when I first started using that limit where like it would pop up and I would be like, oh, I'm actually not doing anything anymore. Like I was posting, or I was like checking on my like 3 friends that I wanted to like connect with today, or like doing something specific. And then it just like turned into like a vast, like, what's happening on the internet search. And the time limit would be like, come up, and I'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. Like we're done. And it was just like a nice reminder. And then it also like brings some consciousness. There were times where I was like, no, I need like 15 minutes more. I am doing something, or like, oh, you know what? I take that feedback, but I am still going to like keep using it. And it's just, I think it's like a good first step to like just having some consciousness around like, okay, how am I interacting with this? Is it positive or negative? And like, is it something that I want to change? Will it make my life better to change this?
That's awesome. I mean, I think they give a lot of self-discipline, which is cool. And I think, it's just like, I think part of the challenge currently in the world is a lot of young people get their phones a lot earlier. Like, when did you get your first cell phone?
Oh my God, like everyone's totally addicted to this. Like this isn't like a super easy thing to just like, oh, like just stop smoking. Like everyone's addicted to like checking their phones, having it in your pocket. Like it's something that is a huge part of my life. I got my first cell phone when I think it was when I first started riding. It was when I was riding my bike to middle school, and now I'm dating myself, but I had like a Razor flip phone, and you would like press the button like 10 times to like text your friend, and you would send like 3 texts a month or something. So it's a different world. Like that was not a highly addictive piece of technology. Like it was really cute. It was a pink Razor. It was very fun to like have, but it was not something that you were going to spend a lot of time with. And now like having an iPhone, like it's infinite. And similar to social media, I actually think there's like huge positives, like education. Like it is so much more accessible. People can do and learn and experience and share all these things that they never could before. That's hugely positive, especially in terms of like, in my opinion, like democratizing access to technology and education. Like there's a lot of people who like don't have access to these resources in other places, and that now can at like a very affordable rate. More so with education, like for young kids. I know that like an iPhone is not an affordable thing, generally speaking. It's certainly like if you can get a college education on it, it's much different than traveling, moving there, enrolling. So I think there's positives. But I also think that it can be really challenging, especially when those habits are formed earlier and earlier.
Yeah, yeah, and I think more and more more recently, it's become more and more clear that there's so much money tied up into our attention and basically buying it, and the younger mind is so susceptible to that.
Yeah.
What would you look? I mean, I hate to keep asking you what would you say to these people, but like what what's this? What do we do for the young kids who aren't like who their parents like give them an iPad because it's easy? You know,
Totally.
how do we get over that hurdle?
Yeah, I mean, and that's totally understandable also for the parents. Like everyone's probably stretched, and like when you're really busy and they're probably working really hard and childcare is really like under available and expensive. Like I can see how this problem perpetuates. I would say, in my opinion, I'm a firm believer in experiences in the outdoors. I think nature is very healing and has a really like positive balancing effect, especially in relationship to technology. And that's part of why, we were talking earlier, like, why do I keep sharing on social media? I think, finding something that you love to do and that you want more time to do is a great first step. And for me, cycling is that. Like, I just love being on my bike. When I'm on my bike, I don't want to be on my phone. And, that's a great motivator. But I also think it's like a coping mechanism for a lot of other things. Like it helps you deal with stress and anxiety and work through problems in your mind, like while you're riding. And I think that's an experience that young kids should have, whether it's like going for a hike, going for a run, going for a ride, just being outdoors for a bit. I think you can find a lot of what you're looking for externally in technology within your own self when you're put in those types of environments.
Well said. How about for someone?
Everyone, ride bikes.
Yeah, basically get a bike.
Yes.
What? So, putting yourself in the shoes of a young person who has a dream, and they want, well, if they have a dream, they obviously want to pursue it, but they are pulled in the complete opposite direction by peers, peer pressure from school, teachers, whatever, parents telling them that they should pursue this career, which has nothing to do with their dream that they've had. What suggestions would you have?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I was pretty lucky. Like my career ended up following a direction that, certainly wasn't like what everyone was doing at that age and what my friends were doing. But it was something that I had a lot of support with, which I know is a huge privilege and I really appreciate, especially now looking back. But I think, trusting yourself is the first step and really like thinking critically about whether this is what you want to do and you see a real future. And then I think mapping out the steps to what that type of a dream would take to accomplish. For me, I didn't really know at the time that I started racing that it would be possible to race at this level. And I certainly didn't know all the steps, but I think I started with like some initial steps. Like what would it take to win a local race? What would it take to win a state level race, a national level race? Okay, now I get to compete in Europe. Oh, wow. Clearly it's going to take a lot more to compete there. And so the process kind of went like that for me. But I think when you can map out, like, here's where I want to go, here's where I am, and these are those steps, then it's easier to communicate to other people why you're doing it and what that dream is and how you see yourself reaching it. But I think it also makes you more likely to like take those initial steps and just start to form that trajectory. And now I think we're going back to like the very beginning of our conversation. We're coming full circle. I think when you can do that, like your starting point is not as important as that trajectory. And as soon as you like start to improve, you start to make progress and you're moving in that right direction, I am sure that if you can kind of like map that out and continue to see where that's going, like people will support you. Even if maybe at that starting point they're saying like, hey, you're here and you want to go here. if you have a plan, if you have that trajectory, and if you're willing to take those incremental steps day after day, I think, you have a good chance of getting there and of earning a lot of support along the way.
Yeah, breaking it down into little steps and then just taking the first one goes a long way, right?
Yeah.
I should have asked this. Talk about not going full circle. Tell me about your affiliation with Maxxis and how that started.
Yeah, so I started working with Maxxis in 2019. I joined the Scots Ram mountain bike race team, and they're my professional team to this day. I'll race for them through the next Olympics at least. So obviously, like, a very important part of my support structure and a team I'm really grateful to race for. And they've been supported by Maxxis for a really long time. I think they have had a very long-standing sponsor relationship. So for me, I kind of got to walk into that and learn from my teammates and start to use the products, which was a really great experience. And then more recently, we've worked together quite a bit to develop new tires that are best for different conditions on the XC race circuit. So we have a really awesome mud tire, we have a great short track tire, and I've really appreciated that innovation and also the kind of collaboration to get the athletes the best product possible.
So eyes are on the next Olympics, and I'm sure a bunch of races between now and then. What are you most looking forward to? Or what are you looking forward to generally?
Yeah, I think, we talked a little bit about at the beginning about that kind of reset and that build back. And I think for me, it's really rewarding, particularly after failing big time, to work with the team and to just kind of grind away and make progress. And I think, we're hoping that in the next few years, there's one of those breakthrough moments. And I think, working towards that with this team of people that I know believes in me and I know is willing to push through tough times and have my back and figure it out together, I think will be a really exciting and rewarding process.
Any closing thoughts, Kate? Any thoughts?
Any thoughts?
Anything you want to close out with, or you feel good?
I feel good.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for taking the time on a Sunday.
Thank you. No problem.
I really appreciate it. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for listening to that conversation I had with Kate Courtney back in November in the Bay Area. I really appreciate Kate's intentionality, and I think that's probably contributed to her success in the sport, is being so focused and driven and not distracted by the various things that are thrown her way, including on social media and with her phone. Kate has an impressive social media following, and even still, she's not sucked into all of the distractions and noise that comes with, well, what I can imagine comes with being a prominent figure on social media. So kudos to Kate, and thank you so much to her for her time, and thank you to you for listening. We have 2 more episodes coming up over the next 4 weeks. Next week, next episode, we have Barry Nobles, another incredibly talented athlete in the BMX discipline. And Barry's going to be the second to last one in this series. Make sure you check out my video with Kate Courtney that came out a couple days ago. It's posted on the Eyes Up Ride Instagram as well as the Maxxis Tires YouTube page. Check it out. Enjoy. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the last 2 episodes and whatever comes next. It's a developing platform, and there is sure to be some great goodies coming your way. So look forward to that, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks. And also, please be sure to turn on driving focus. This feature is available in your phone's settings. If you don't know how, head over to eyesupride.com/resources. It's an easy way to eliminate distractions in the car from your phone. Keeps those pesky notifications from lighting up while you're driving so you can focus on what's really important, which is the road in front of you. Thanks again for listening. Have a great couple weeks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.